Hello class, welcome to the Contemporary World subject. Last meeting, we talked about the imaginary and physical divisions of the world. We were able to differentiate the characteristics of global north and global south. We also discussed the first, second, and the third world division. In today's discussion, we will focus on Asian regionalism. This is gonna be a short discussion lang naman. So for the meantime, let's set aside the other continents of the world. Let's just focus our mind on Asian continent. So let's start this discussion by defining regionalism. What do we mean by regionalism? Regionalism is a political ideology that favors a specific region over a greater area, and it usually happens because of political separations, religion, geography, cultural boundaries, linguistic regions, and managerial divisions. In short, it's the economic cooperation and economic arrangements of group of countries aimed at facilitating or enhancing regional integration. What's the difference of regionalization and globalization? I assume that you're already familiar with the definition of globalization since this was the first lesson we have discussed in prelim, and it's the first word you have encountered in the subject, the contemporary world. So when we say regionalization, it's a process of dividing an area into smaller segments called regions. Okay, it's the division of area. Okay, and then when we say globalization, it's a process by which the people of the world are unified into a single society and function together. So basically, sabi nga natin sa globalization, there is interconnectedness of people. Okay, there is interrelation, there is association. Another concept is regionalism. What is regionalism? It is the theory or practice of regional rather than central systems of administration of economic, cultural, or political affiliation. Basically, their goal here is to increase their political power and influence in other regions. Okay? So instead of having a centralized government, instead of having centralized administration, sa regionalism kasi, merong i-assign or merong head, merong designated head sa bawat regions. Okay? And we also have regionalization. Okay? When we say regionalization, it's the division of a nation into states or provinces. Now question, why countries form regional organization? Bakit nga ba? They form regional organization as a way of coping with the challenges of globalization. So the focus of our discussion today is all about Asian regionalism. So when we say Asian regionalism, it's a product of economic interaction between Asian countries. Okay? So you have to take note that it's not on political planning, but rather it's on economic interaction between Asian countries. Okay? So when we say Asian, of course, we are referring to the people from Asia. As a result of successful outward orientation growth strategies of these Asian countries, Asian economies have grown not only richer but also closer together. As they say, there is unity in diversity. Familiar ba kayo dun sa passage na yun or narinig nyo na ba yun? Example of unity in diversity is the ASEAN or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. When we say diversity pala, it means differences. Okay? So why is Asia considered the continent of diversity? It's because people in Asia have different cultures, they have different customs and traditions, they have different religions and beliefs, they have different governments, and many more. Okay? So as Asia's economies have grown larger and more complex, they also have become more integrated. Okay? In what way? Of course, through trade, financial flows, direct investments, and other forms of economic and social exchange. In the recent years, new technological trends have further strengthened ties among them, as have the rise of China and India and the region's growing weight in the global economy. However, nagkaroon din ng misfortune, nagkaroon din ng mga difficulties. And one of the difficulties they have encountered is that the 1997 or 1998 financial crisis dealt a severe setback to much of the region, highlighting Asia's shared interests and common vulnerabilities and providing an impetus for regional cooperation. In the early stages of Asia's economic takeoff, regional integration proceeded slowly. East Asian economies focus on exporting to developed country markets. So take note of this, they just focus on exporting of their goods and services rather than selling to each other. Initially, they specialize in simple labor-intensive manufactures. The Japanese economist Akamatsu in 1962 famously compared this pattern of development to flying geese. Alam niyo ba yung geese? Yung gansa, okay? So in this model, economists move information not because they were directly linked to each other, but because they followed similar paths. So since these development paths hinge on sequential and sometimes competing, they did not initially yield strong economic links within Asia itself. Now, Asian economies are becoming closely intertwined. So when we say intertwined, magkaugnay. Okay, you have to take note that this is not because the region's development strategy has changed. It still remains predominantly non-discriminatory and outward-oriented. What then is the reason behind this? Interdependence is deepening because Asia's economies have grown large and prosperous enough to become important to each other, and because their patterns of production increasingly depend on networks that span several Asian economies and involve wide-ranging exchanges of parts and components among them. Next concept, we have regionalization versus globalization. So, na-define na natin kanina si regionalization. Okay? It's the process of dividing an area into smaller segments called regions. Example is the division of nation into provinces. And a good example of this is the business. They use regionalization as a total in management. On the other hand, we have globalization. So, we have defined this term for many times already. Again, globalization is the process of international integration arising from the interchange of worldviews, products, ideas, and other aspects such as technology and many more. Okay, so let's try to compare regionalization versus globalization in terms of nature. As to nature, globalization promotes the integration of economics across state borders all around the world. But regionalization is precisely the opposite because it is dividing an area into smaller segments. Okay, sabi nga natin before sa globalization, it is borderless, walang hangganan. Okay? As to market naman, ano yung pinagkaiba ni regionalization and globalization? Globalization allows many companies to trade on international level, so it allows free market. Therefore, sa globalization, merong free market na tinatawag. But in regionalized system, monopolies are likely to develop. Okay, so when we say monopolies, in economics, a monopoly is a single seller. Okay, so isa lang yung nagbebenta ng isang goods or services. There is no competition na nangyayari. At syempre, solo niya lang, solo yung nagtitinda. Wala siyang ibang kalaban. Okay? As to cultural and societal relations naman tayo, globalization accelerate to multiculturalism by free and inexpensive movement of people, but regionalization does not support this. Okay? So, when we say multiculturalism, it's the view that cultures, races, and ethnicities, particularly those of minority groups, deserve special acknowledgement of their differences within a dominant political culture. Okay? Na kabaliktaran naman sa regionalization, hindi nila ina-acknowledge yung multiculturalism. As to aid naman tayo, globalized international community is also more willing to come to the aid of a country stricken by a natural disaster, but a regionalized system does not get involved in the affairs of other areas. Okay? So sa globalized naman or sa globalization, they are willing to help. Pwede silang magbigay ng financial aid, okay? Particularly dun sa mga bansa na nagsuffer or nakaranas ng natural disaster. Pero sa regionalization kasi, hindi sila nangingialam, hindi sila nag-offer ng aid or ng tulong. Okay? How about dun sa kanilang technological advances? Okay? Globalization has driven great advances in technology, but advanced technology is rarely available in one country or region. Therefore, sa globalization, there is already advancement of technology, pero sa regionalization, wala pa. Okay? Moving on to the factors leading to the greater integration of the Asian regions. Okay, so regional integration is a process in which neighboring states enter into an agreement in order to upgrade cooperation through common institutions and rules. So basically, sa regional integration, it's a process by which two or more countries agree to cooperate and work closely together to achieve peace, stability, and wealth. Okay? The objectives of the agreement could range from economic to political to environmental, although it has typically taken the form of a political economy initiative. So in this part naman, commercial interests are the focus for achieving broader socio-political and security objectives. Okay? So regional integration has been organized either via supranational institutional structures or through intergovernmental decision-making or a combination of both. So how do we define supranational institutional? A supranational organization is an administrative structure that goes beyond the boundaries of states. It is a multinational union or association in which member countries cede authority and sovereignty, or simply means they surrender their power and sovereignty on at least some internal matters to the group whose decisions are binding on its members. On the other hand, when we say intergovernmental or intergovernmentalism, it refers to arrangements whereby the nations or the countries, in any situations and conditions, they can control, they can make decisions and cooperate with one another on matters of common interest. So past efforts of regional integration have often focused on removing barriers to free trade, okay, yung pagtatanggal ng mga tariff na mga tax sa free trade in the region, and they also increase the free movement of people, labor, goods, and capital across national borders. They also reduce the possibility of regional armed conflict and adopting cohesive regional stances on policy issues such as the environment, climate change, and migration. So these are the actions done by the regional integration. Okay, so we have this term intra-regional trade. What does it mean? Intra-regional trade refers to trade which focuses on economic exchange primarily between countries of the same region or economic zone. Okay, so basically there is trade, or may pakikipagpalitan ng kalakalan between countries of the same region. For example, sa Southeast Asia, kabilang dito ang Philippines, kabilang dito ang Malaysia, Singapore. So kapag nagkaroon ng trading or pakikipagkalakalan sa mga bansang to, therefore there is intra-regional trade. Okay? So in the recent years, countries within economic trade regimes such as ASEAN in Southeast Asia, for example, have increased the level of trade and commodity exchange between themselves, which reduces the inflation and tariff barriers associated with foreign markets, resulting in growing prosperity. So what is ASEAN? When we say ASEAN, it stands for Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and it is a regional grouping that promotes economic, political, and security cooperation among its 10 members. Ano yung mga bansa na member ng ASEAN? So basically nga, ASEAN, Southeast Asia. So yung mga countries sa Southeast Asia ang kabilang dito. We have Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Question: what is the purpose of ASEAN? ASEAN's purpose is to promote economic and cultural exchange among its member countries, maintain peace and stability in Southeast Asia, and establish relationships with foreign powers with similar aims. Okay, so that explains our lecture in Asian Regionalism. Sabi ko sa inyo, this is gonna be a short discussion lang. I hope you have learned something today. Thank you so much for joining our today's session. Again, this is Sir Marvin telling you that you should never stop learning because life never stops teaching. Have a great day ahead. Thank you so much and goodbye. See you next time.